going to cover the digestive system in this video, beginning with some illustrations. The digestive system consists of organs that make up the alimentary canal. The alimentary canal is a tube where food and waste products travel. It begins at the mouth, continues into the pharynx. The esophagus carries the food to the stomach. Stomach contents are converted into chyme. Chyme then enters into the duodenum, the first part of the small intestine, continues into the jejunum, which is the middle section of the small intestine, and finally into the ileum, which is the distal portion of the small intestine. The contents of the ileum then empty into the large intestine. The large intestine, as you can see, frames the small intestine. The sphincter between the ileum and this blind-ended pouch of the large intestine, called the cecum, is called the ileocecal valve. The cecum has the appendix, which is a lymphoid organ coming off of it. From the cecum, feces moves into the colon, consisting of an ascending, transverse, descending, and sigmoid colon, into the rectum and then the anal canal. The opening at the anal canal is the anus. Accessory organs include the tongue, teeth, salivary glands, the liver, which produces bile, the gallbladder, which stores bile, and the pancreas. Let's now look at the cadaver images in APR. This is a view of the thoracic cavity. The thoracic cavity, recall, is divided from the abdominal cavity, which is inferior to it, by the diaphragm. Let's begin with the esophagus. The esophagus is a muscular tube. It connects the pharynx superiorly to the stomach inferiorly. The esophagus pierces the diaphragm at the esophageal hiatus. The muscularis externa of the esophagus will consist of skeletal muscles for the upper third portion of the esophagus, smooth muscle in the lower third portion, and a combination of both skeletal and smooth muscle in the middle section of the esophagus. Inferior to the diaphragm will be your liver. So this is my liver here. This is a view of the oral cavity, this space here, your tongue, your teeth, the space in between your lips, these are your lips here, or your labia. The space between your lips and your teeth is called the oral vestibule. The roof of the oral cavity consists anteriorly of the hard palate, which is bone, and posteriorly of the soft palate, which is muscle. The distalmost portion of the soft palate will be the uvula. Here are your lips. If you go over here to the lips, contain the orbicularis oris muscle. The pharynx is going to be the tube that connects the oral cavity to the nasal cavity. It runs posterior to the nasal cavity, oral cavity, and down into your throat. It leads posteriorly into the esophagus and anteriorly into the larynx. The sections of the pharynx that we're interested in for the digestive system will be those sections of the pharynx that will be passageways for food and liquid, in addition to air. That will consist of the oral pharynx behind the oral cavity and the laryngopharynx that is in your throat, leading, as I mentioned before, posteriorly to the esophagus. Your gums are called your gingivae or gingiva for singular. Your upper teeth are your maxillary teeth because they are embedded in the maxillae or maxillary bones. Your lower teeth are going to be called your mandibular teeth because they will be anchored in the mandible. And again, these are going to be your lips right here and your tongue. You have 3 pairs of salivary glands. The largest pair will be the parotid glands. They're in the buccal region or your cheeks. Underneath the tongue will be the sublingual glands, and underneath the mandible will be the submandibular glands. When you learn your teeth, be sure that you specify whether they are maxillary teeth. So what you're looking at here, that makes up your hard palate. This is looking at your mandibular teeth, so here is your mandible. We're going to start with the maxillary teeth. These teeth are all paired, so we have 2 central incisors, and we're going to be moving out laterally. From the central incisors, you will have the lateral incisors, and that will then lead to the canines. From there, you're going to have your premolars, which are also known as bicuspid because they have 2 cusps. So we're going to have the first premolars, and then you'll have your second premolars. And then you're going to get into your molars. We'll start with the first molar. These are your largest molars, and you're going to have 4 or 5 cusps. Second molars and third molars, your wisdom teeth. The mandibular teeth are going to follow the same arrangement. Now we're going to look at the abdominal cavity. We'll be looking at the intestines here. Here's your small intestine. The small intestine will be framed by the large intestine. You can see part of the large intestine here has been cut there, but if we go here, you can see part of it here. Between the small intestine, you're going to see this membrane here, and that is called the mesentery. This is your liver, your gallbladder, your stomach. The first part of the small intestine is the duodenum. It is C-shaped, and it surrounds the head of the pancreas. This is the head of the pancreas. This is the pancreas here. This here is the spleen. The next portion of the small intestine is called the jejunum. You cannot see it here. It has been removed. If I go back to the small intestine, it would be this section up in here. And then the jejunum leads to the distalmost section of the small intestine, and that is called the ileum. So what we have here is just a small portion of the ileum. The ileum is going to release its contents into the first part of the large intestine called the cecum. The cecum is this blind-ended pouch. Coming off of the cecum, you have your appendix. From the cecum, the contents, which will now be called feces, will move into the ascending colon. It's called ascending because the feces is moving up. And then we're going to have a transverse colon where the feces moves across. There will be a bend called the right colic flexure or hepatic flexure because of its proximity to the liver. The transverse colon then feeds into the descending colon, and the bend between the transverse colon and the descending colon is going to be the left colic flexure, also known as the splenic flexure because the spleen is located in this area here. The descending colon then leads into an S-shaped portion of the colon called the sigmoid colon. The sigmoid colon then will lead into the rectum. From there, the feces will go into the anal canal, and the opening of the anal canal is called the anus. Draping over the intestines is the greater omentum. It is a double-layered peritoneum. Remember that the peritoneum consists of the serous membranes. You will also have a lesser omentum. That's going to be this area right in here between the stomach and the liver. The muscularis externa in the colon is modified. The longitudinal layer is arranged into 3 bands called tinea coli. This is looking at the stomach. Recall that the tube that carries food to the stomach is called the esophagus. Once the food is in the stomach, it will be broken down into a paste-like substance called chyme. That chyme will then enter the first part of the small intestine called the duodenum. This is the pancreas here. That's the head of the pancreas, and you're looking at the body of the pancreas here. Let's go back to the stomach. The stomach is going to have 4 regions or parts. That area that is next to the esophagus is called the cardia. Projecting superiorly will be the fundus of the stomach. So you can see how it moves superiorly from the cardia. The majority of the stomach is going to be the body of the stomach. And then the distal funnel-shaped portion of the stomach is going to be called the pyloric part of the stomach. You are also going to have a lesser curvature and a greater curvature. Internally, the stomach has folds, gastric folds, when it is empty. Those gastric folds are also known as rugae. That allows the stomach to expand when it fills with food. In addition, you're going to have 2 sphincters, a sphincter here between the esophagus and the cardia of the stomach, and that sphincter is called the lower esophageal sphincter. After the food goes into the stomach, that sphincter closes and prevents that food from going back up into the esophagus. Between the pyloric part of the stomach and the duodenum, you're going to have another sphincter called the pyloric sphincter, and that regulates the movement of the contents of the stomach into the duodenum. The contents of the stomach are very acidic, and so you don't want to release all of those contents at the same time. In the duodenum, you're going to have this area right here, which is called the major duodenal papilla. So notice that the papilla surrounds an opening, and that opening is the opening of the hepatopancreatic ampulla. We'll look at that in another image. You're looking inside the pancreas here. This is the bile duct. This is a duct inside the pancreas called the main pancreatic duct. The main pancreatic duct is carrying pancreatic juice consisting of enzymes and buffers. The bile duct is carrying bile. They merge here in an area called the hepatopancreatic ampulla, and that's going to be here in this wall. And so the major duodenal papilla surrounds the opening of the hepatopancreatic ampulla. When fats enter the duodenum, the gallbladder contracts. Bile then will empty into the bile duct and then into the duodenum, along with the pancreatic juices. You have 2 views of the liver here, an anterior view and then a posterior inferior view. This is your gallbladder. The liver is separated into 4 lobes. The largest lobe is going to be your right lobe. Then you'll have your left lobe. Separating those 2 lobes will be a falciform ligament, or running between those 2 lobes. Embedded within that falciform ligament, you are going to have a round ligament. That round ligament is the remnant of the umbilical vein of the fetus. To view the other 2 lobes, you have to go to the posterior inferior view. We're going to have a caudate lobe. Next to that, right in here, is the inferior vena cava. And then you're going to have a quadrate lobe. The quadrate lobe is shaped like a quadrangle. In this view, we can see the liver, the gallbladder, the stomach, and if you lift the stomach, you'll be able to see the pancreas. The hepatocytes in the liver produce bile. Bile is stored in the gallbladder. The gallbladder contracts when fat enters the duodenum. The ducts receiving the bile produced by the liver are called the hepatic ducts. There is a right and a left. The hepatic ducts then empty into a common hepatic duct, into a cystic duct that carries the bile to the gallbladder to be stored. When the gallbladder contracts, the bile leaves the gallbladder through the cystic duct into the bile duct, also known as the common bile duct. The bile duct will merge with the main pancreatic duct, or simply known as the pancreatic duct, in the pancreas. The pancreatic duct is carrying pancreatic juice consisting of digestive enzymes and buffers. Where the pancreatic duct and the bile duct merge, this creates an enlarged area called a hepatopancreatic ampulla. The hepatopancreatic ampulla then empties into the duodenum. Right there is the opening of it. The raised area around the hepatopancreatic ampulla opening is called the major duodenal papilla. The pancreas consists of three regions: the head of the pancreas, the body of the pancreas, and the tail of the pancreas. It is described as having the same shape of a tadpole. This is a different view of the round ligament. You're looking at it from an inferior view. And remember, the round ligament is actually a remnant of the fetal umbilical vein. Before looking at histology slides, I want to go over the anatomy of the wall of the alimentary canal. The wall of the alimentary canal will consist of 4 layers. The lumen is the hollow portion of the alimentary canal. In contact with the lumen, you will have an epithelium. The epithelium, lamina propria, and a thin band of smooth muscle will make up the mucosa. The mucosa is the first layer of the alimentary canal. The epithelium of the mouth, pharynx, esophagus, and anal canal is stratified squamous epithelium, and this provides additional protection. For other areas of the alimentary canal, beginning with the stomach, you will have simple columnar epithelium. Epithelial cells have a short lifespan, from a couple of days in the mouth to about a week in the gut. Moving outward from the lumen, you will have the lamina propria. The lamina propria consists of loose connective tissue, blood vessels, and lymphatics. A type of lymphoid tissue called MALT, or mucosa-associated lymphoid tissue, is located within the lamina propria. Recall, Peyer's patches are a form of MALT located in the small intestine. You will find Peyer's patches in the distal portion of the small intestine, the ileum. As we continue to move out, you will have a thin layer of smooth muscle called the muscularis mucosa. Do not get this confused with the muscularis externa or muscularis. This thin band of smooth muscles is slightly contracted at all times to create folds, which will increase the surface area for digestion and absorption. The next layer, moving outward, will be the submucosa, and the submucosa will consist of blood vessels, lymphatics, and nerves, as well as dense connective tissue. The next layer is called the muscularis or muscularis externa. For most of the alimentary canal, you will have 2 layers, an inner circular layer, and then an outer longitudinal layer. The type of muscle that you have in the muscularis externa changes depending upon where you are in the alimentary canal. In the stomach, you're going to have a 3rd layer. That is going to be the oblique layer. The longitudinal layer of the muscularis externa in the colon is modified into 3 bands. These are called the tinea coli. The outer layer is the serosa. Now we're going to be looking at some histology slides. This is a histology slide of the esophagus. I know that this is the esophagus because this is stratified squamous epithelium. You'll need to be able to identify the different layers. So we're going to start here with the mucosa. The mucosa is going to have 3 sublayers. You're going to have the epithelium. As we're moving from the lumen, this is the lumen outward, the epithelium, then you'll have a lamina propria, which is going to be connective tissue. And then from there, you're going to get into a thin band of smooth muscle, and this is going to be the muscularis mucosa. So we'll have the epithelium. The lamina propria is not highlighted in this slide, but it'll be right there. And then you're going to have the muscularis mucosa. And all of this makes up the mucosa. Deep to the mucosa, moving outward, you're going to have a submucosa, and that's going to be connective tissue as well. And then as we continue to move out, we're going to have the muscularis externa. The muscularis externa will be modified depending upon where you are in the alimentary canal. Here, because we are in the esophagus, we're going to have 2 layers. In the upper third portion of the esophagus, the muscularis externa will be skeletal muscle. In the lower third, it will be smooth muscle, but in the middle third, it will be a combination of the 2. And then the outermost layer will be the adventitia. Adventitia, because the esophagus is located outside the abdominal cavity, that portion that is outside the abdominal cavity will have an adventitia. When it pierces the diaphragm, remember at the esophageal hiatus, it will be covered by a serosa. This is a higher magnification of the esophagus. So again, I can tell that this is stratified squamous. That's how I'm going to know it's the esophagus. So here's my epithelium, the lamina propria, and then the muscularis mucosa. So the muscularis mucosa is going to create folds in the mucosa to increase surface area for digestion and absorption of nutrients. This is looking at a histology slide of the stomach. The thing that I recognize here is you're going to look at this area right in here. This is very unique to the stomach. So the epithelium is going to be located in this area, and we're going to see simple columnar cells that are going to produce mucus. That mucus then helps protect the lining of the stomach from the acidic contents. Below that, remember you're going to have a lamina propria, and then moving outward, you're going to have a muscularis mucosa. And all of that is going to make up the mucosa of the stomach. Deep to that, you're going to have a submucosa, and then deep to that, you're going to have a muscularis externa, or simply known as muscularis. So this is the lumen of the stomach there. Let's magnify this. Right in here, these are the simple columnar cells. You can see their nuclei here. They're filled with mucus. They are producing mucus here, again, to create a layer of mucus that's going to help protect the lining or the mucosa of the stomach. We're going to have folds here that create pits, and those are called gastric pits. So you're going to have those mucose secreting cells there. So the gastric pits are filled with mucus. We're also going, if you go deeper, you're going to go into gastric glands. We're going to talk about this in lecture, but you're going to have different types of cells here. Some of these cells are going to produce hydrochloric acid. Some of them are going to produce an inactive form of the enzyme pepsin, which begins the breakdown of proteins. And then you're going to have some cells that are going to release some hormones as well. This is a histology view of the small intestine. The ileum specifically, how do I know that? Because of these finger-like projections, and these are called villi. This is the mucosa, and then you're going to have the submucosa. This area right in here is the muscularis externa. We've just magnified this, so now I can see this is a villus, this is another villus. So these are my villi. These are my simple columnar epithelial cells. Interspersed between them, you see the white cells filled with mucus. These are my goblet cells. This is a histology slide of the liver. The liver is divided up into repeating units. We call these functional units called lobules. And so this would be a liver lobule, or this right in here would be one. This would be another one. They are separated by connective tissue septa. In the center of each lobule, you're going to have a central vein. And you're going to have a portal triad. The portal triad because there are 3 tubes here. You're going to have a branch of the hepatic portal vein, which is carrying nutrient-rich blood from your digestive tract to the liver so that the liver cells, and that's all these cells here, hepatocytes, can process all of those nutrients as well as any toxins that might be in there or alcohol. You can notice or identify that as a artery. So that is a branch of the hepatic artery. And this is carrying oxygen-rich blood from the systemic circuit to the hepatocytes. This right in here is a branch of the bile duct. The hepatocytes produce bile. The bile then goes into this bile duct branch to the right and left hepatic ducts, to the common hepatic ducts, and so forth. Blood in the hepatic portal vein and in the hepatic artery are going to go into these little white areas. These are sinusoids. And as the blood goes through the sinusoids toward the central vein, the hepatocytes are processing whatever is in it. This is your last histology slide. And this is the histology slide of the pancreas. The pancreas is a mixed organ. It is going to have an exocrine portion. The exocrine portion is the portion of the pancreas that produces pancreatic juice, consisting of enzymes, digestive enzymes, and buffers. That exocrine portion is this area here. So that's going to be the darker staining area. It's going to consist of acinar cells. So if we look here, you can see acinar cells there. And they make up the acini portion of the liver. The endocrine portion of the liver is your pancreatic islets here, and the pancreatic islets are going to produce several hormones, 2 of which we learned about: insulin, which decreases blood glucose levels, and glucagon, which increases blood glucose levels. Remember that insulin is released by beta cells, glucagon by alpha cells. This completes this video.